Ready when you are.
Hello, everyone. That pick up. Hello. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Legacy Lecture. It's pretty packed tonight. It's awesome. All right, thank you all so much for coming, and we're glad you all could join us tonight. My name is Don, and I'll be your host for this evening, along with my fellow event coordinator, Jesse. So what is Legacy Lecture? Legacy Lecture is an annual event hosted by the UCSD Scholar Society that allows one professor to give a lecture to the prompt, if this were the last lecture you ever gave, what would you want to tell the world? We've had many great professors join us in the past, including Dr. Nima Mashiri of the CSE department in 2021. Yeah. And Dr. Will Styler of the linguistics department in 2022. I believe he's somewhere in this room. Yeah. Now, the professor of Legacy Lecture is voted for by the students over the course of the school year, and the winner of the voting polls is chosen to give their lecture in the spring. Maybe you can't tell by the weather, but it is spring, so here we are. Students tend to vote for certain types of professors. Professors who are passionate about what they teach, truly invested in students' learning, and are committed to making a warm and welcoming environment in the classroom. And this year was no different. This year, the students have chosen Dr. Marc Garellek of the linguistics department. So linguistics 2 years in a row. So at this rate, you might be able to pick up a linguistics minor after these lectures. So a brief introduction of Marc. He's a professor of linguistics and the director of the UCSD Phonetics Lab. His research interests include phonetics and laboratory phonology, morphology of phonetics interfaces, and more. He has published papers on more than 16 different languages. Tonight, he'll be speaking about how voices speak volumes. And without further ado, the floor is yours. Marc.
Thank you, Don. And might I suggest for the Scholar Society, you could consider rebranding to the linguistics lecture from now on. So I'm going to start with a thank you. Thank you all for being here. So thank you to the Scholar Society for this opportunity. It's really an honor, and particularly to Jesse for all your help in planning this event. Thanks to my linguistics colleagues for all the support and for getting the word out there, and of course to the students. Thank you for nominating me and for voting for me. I can't believe you did. But you make me feel all kinds of emotions, so thank you. All right, so the title for this talk is Voices Speak Volumes. And the general theme of tonight is all the ways in which our voices, when speaking, do amazing things. So we get lots of information about our voice when we speak. Listeners, when they hear a speaker speak, will get information about who we are. And as a linguist, of course, I'm particularly interested in the information that we get about the languages that we speak. So both these points, who we are as people and the languages that we speak, those are the themes I'm going to be talking about tonight. Let's start by thinking of the voice as an instrument. It's quite an amazing instrument. I hope this isn't going to be too loud as I play it. I want you to listen to this sound file and let me know afterwards. Just think about whose voice you're hearing. Do you recognize the voice? Do you recognize it as a familiar voice? Do you recognize it as from a song that you know? Can you identify the song? Can you identify the singer? And anything else you might notice about the way the voice is varying over the course of the song. So All right. Anyone recognize this song? Yes, it's familiar to many of you. Not everyone. Okay. Maybe it's age graded a little bit, I think. All right. Somebody who recognizes the song and the singer. Can you let me know who it is? Yes, you in the back. That's right, Mariah Carey, Emotions. All right, so Mariah Carey is a singer who's known for very dynamic use of her voice, lots of skill. So here's a video from the same clip. Lots of dynamic use of the voice, but the goal for today is to talk about when we speak. So of course when we sing, we do amazing things with our voices, assuming that we're not me. But when we speak, when we are all speaking, we do amazing things with our voice. And that's going to be the theme for tonight. All right, so first off, what do we mean by our voice? What does it mean what do we mean when we say our voice? The voice is actually an incredibly hard thing to define. I love this quote by a famous scientist of the singing voice, Johann Sundberg, where he says, "Everyone knows what the voice is until they try to pin it down." It's the kind of thing that you just know what it is, you know we have a voice, but it's really hard to define. One possible definition, one that I kind of like, is to think of the voice as one's auditory face. So just like our face conveys information about who we are and about our moods, our voices likewise convey that kind of information. So our voices convey information about who we are, our moods, but it goes beyond just who we are and how we're feeling. It's also used dynamically for changes in various things that I'll talk about tonight, but important things for language. One of the hardest things to define is the distinction between voice versus speech. And very often our definitions of the voice kind of blend in with our definitions of speech. I'm going to be using the following kind of distinction that you might want to keep in mind. So the voice is sound that's made primarily by the vocal folds, which I'll talk more about later. They're often called vocal cords, but the more technical term is the folds. Sound made by the vocal folds when we're speaking. And it's inherently less variable than speech. So it changes quite regularly, but it doesn't change as much as speech. Speech, on the other hand, is all the sounds that we make when speaking, regardless of where we make them in our bodies. And it is more variable. It's changing all the time, really quickly. So how do we produce voice with our vocal folds? So if we define the voice as sound made by our vocal folds when speaking, then we have to say where the vocal folds are. The vocal folds are housed in our larynx, which is down here at the bottom of our throat. In a structure, this is a model of the larynx, Larry, in a structure that looks quite large in this model, but is actually quite small on our bodies. And our vocal folds are housed within the larynx, so around here. I thought, if this was the last lecture I would ever give, assuming I would be much older than I currently am, I thought I would like to show photos of myself over the years. And so here's one photo of me, not from very long ago, from my first year as a professor here at UCSD, showing off Larry the larynx. All right, so this is from the year 2013, 2014. Some more photos to come. All right, when we perceive the voice, we perceive various aspects about it. So we perceive changes in loudness, from a very quiet voice to a very loud voice. Those are dynamic changes in loudness. Our vocal folds actually aren't primarily responsible for loudness. That's our lungs and changes in pressure. But our vocal folds, when we move them around, do modulate loudness to some extent. Pitch, from very low to very high. I can't go that high. That's another a dimension at which we change our voice. Tempo, from speaking very slowly to speaking rather quickly. That's a modulation in voice, but also in the rest of our speech apparatus. And importantly for the work that I do is changes in voice quality. Voice quality is another term that's kind of hard to define, but you can think of it as different colors of the voice. And that's why I've represented different terms of voice quality in different colors. So my kind of average voice quality could be thought of as my regular voice. In linguistics, we typically use the term modal, my modal voice. And that's distinct from when I speak with a breathier voice. All right, breathier voice sounds like I'm sighing when I'm speaking. So that's the one over there in blue. I can constrict my vocal folds even more and produce a kind of tense voice. And if I constrict in a certain way, I could even become creaky like this, very constricted, low in flow, and deep, low pitch. On the other hand, I can constrict kind of everything and sound growly when I speak. All right? And you might think that most people don't growl when they speak. That is incorrect. We're going to see examples of growl as an important use of speech. And if you were paying close attention, you would have also heard growls in Mariah Carey's singing, though not quite as growly as when I'm producing them right now, for lack of a better word. All right. So keep in mind these different kind of colors to the voice, these different qualities. These are similar in some way to the way in which a note played on a violin sounds different but similar to a note played on a viola or a note played on a cello or a double bass. All right, if we play similar pitches or even the same pitches, the same notes on all of these instruments or on pairs of these instruments, they all sound similar. They all sound like they come from a string instrument, but they're all kind of colored differently. And that color that comes from that violin quality or that cello quality, that's coming from the entire instrument's shape itself, its structure. It's not just about the string, but it's about the whole body of the instrument. So when we change our voice qualities from my normal voice to a breathier voice quality to a growly quality and so on, that's kind of like changing from a violin to a viola to a cello to a double bass. Not exact, but kind of. So in that sense, our voice is really the ultimate instrument. We can change so much about it all the time. And we do this not just if we're Mariah Carey, but also if just when speaking regularly. All right, so I want you to pay attention to these four attributes. Loudness, so from quiet to loud. Pitch, from low to high. Tempo, from slowly speaking to very quickly speaking. And quality, from more normal voice to breathy voice to maybe a high falsetto voice, and so on in the clip we heard earlier. Surprisingly, when people comment on Mariah Carey's voice, they're commenting on her range, right? Her pitch from low notes to really high notes. I mean, she went up to, I think it's like, I'm going to say at least A6 to like 1,300 hertz. I mean, like a crazy note there. But she also varied her quality of her voice quite dramatically. So there was breath, there was growl, there was creak at the very end, and changes in tempo as well. All right. But back to our speaking voices. So our voices speak volumes about us, who we are as individuals. Our voices tell us say things about our age, our sex, our health, more temporary things like our mood, our stress levels, our personalities, both long-term and short-term. Social things like our gender, our sexual orientation, education, as well as, of course, linguistic things like the sounds that we're making, the dialects that we're speaking, and the languages that we use. Let's start by talking about what we get out of our voice when we're speaking about information about the talkers themselves. So recognizing familiar voices, this actually has a long research history, And the bottom line is that we listeners can recognize familiar voices, voices that that are familiar to us, really well. So here's some data from a study by Diana Van Lanker, Jody Kreiman, my advisor, former advisor, and Karen Emery, who's just down the road at SDSU. Now, at the time they were all at UCLA. They found that if you play a 2-second clip to listeners, open set, meaning you have no idea who the talker could be. It could be anyone. It's just a familiar voice and no context within the audio. And you ask listeners, is this voice recognizable to you? Is it familiar to you? 27% of the time it is. That's kind of amazing considering all the voices that we hear. Now, if you give the same listeners 6 choices, so 6 names, and a 2-second clip, and you ask them to identify the voice, not just recognize whether it's familiar to you, but identify the voice, now listeners do really well. So 70% of the time they are accurate at correctly identifying the voice that was recognizable to them. If you play a 4-second clip, so a little bit longer, and play it backward, right, where it sounds pretty weird, you're not getting any linguistic you're getting very little linguistic information. Now participants do worse, but notice they're still doing pretty well with a 6 list, a list of 6 voices. That's kind of amazing. When you're not getting any information about what the person's saying, you're just getting voice played backward, you can still identify that voice with, of course, given 6 choices. So I thought, let's play a game. Let's try this out. All right, I'm going to play a sound file of a famous voice backward. Now, I should give you a heads up. This is going to sound really weird, like Twin Peaks weird. All right, so keep in mind, you get no information about any linguistic information. You don't know what's being said, but you might still be able to recognize the voice. So let's give this a try. I'm going to raise the volume a little bit first. And I'll let you, laugh it out a little bit once you hear it, because it is quite weird, for lack of a better word.
Let's go, man. So that really hurts. I can't remember it because it. Yeah, scalp and yeah, sure. But so I think his name or not. Double so I should do our where's this?
I'm going to play it a few times. Think, first of all, is it familiar? Does it sound familiar to you? And then later I'm going to ask, can anyone identify the voice? Don't call it out, please. All right, let's try again. Pay close attention. Is this voice recognizable to you? Now, of course, you might not actually know the speaker, but I chose famous voices. I'm giving you a little bit of a clue.
Let's go, man. So that really hurts. I can't remember it because it. Yeah, scalp and yeah, sure. But so I think his name or not. Double so I should do our where's this?
Okay, one more time.
Let's go, man. So that really hurts. I can't remember it because it. Yeah, scalp and yeah, sure. But so I think his name or not. Double so I should do our where's this?
Okay, raise your hand, please, if you think this voice is recognizable. Like you think you know who the person is, you just maybe can or cannot identify them. Oh, that's pretty good. Not bad. All right, does anyone want to give a shot as to who identifying the voice? Who do you think it is? Open set. We have somebody here. I'm going to bring the mic back. Coz, all right, you're up.
Can I go on a limb and say Dolly Parton?
Dolly Parton, that is incorrect. Good try, though. Maxine?
Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus, that is also incorrect. Anyone else want to give it a shot? I'm going to make it easier in case, I'll give you options in case no one knows.
It couldn't be Mariah Carey again, right?
Good guess. It is not Mariah Carey again. That would be tricky of me. I like it. Should have thought about that. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of a clue. 4 options. I'm going to play it again for you. Actually, I won't play it again just in case it... I will. I think it'll work.
Let's go, man. So that really hurts. I can't remember it because it. Yeah, scalp and yeah, sure. But so I think his name or not. Double so I should do our where's this?
Anyone want to guess now? Not Tina Fey. All right. You know who it is? It is not Amy Poehler. We're nearing the end here. Go ahead, Maggie.
It's gotta be Kristen Wiig, right?
No, that is incorrect. Nice try, everyone. All right. It's Mindy Kaling. So let's hear the sample backwards again and forwards.
Let's go. I'm the David Hurl Sacker men very cousin. Yeah, skelf and yap, sure, but the wild and the guy's name or double of what so should do our where's this?
So those of you who know who Mindy Kaling is are probably like, yeah, of course, it's her, right? Okay, this is what she was actually saying.
So the story of why we did the show was a little bit unromantic in that I was approached by Netflix by an executive named Brooke Kessler who had read both of my books. And
All right, that's all it was, 10-second clip. All right, let's try a few more, see if we can get better. All right, voice number 2.
Yes, we schrijft ze nog skedel als het fischer. Så nu merker jeg bare det men dere jo slutt som en als det finner något fan det bekammer.
Played a few times.
Yes, we schrijft ze nog skedel als het fischer. Så nu merker jeg bare det men dere jo slutt som en als det finner något fan det bekammer.
Okay, last time.
Yes, we schrijft ze nog skedel als het fischer. Så nu merker jeg bare det men dere jo slutt som en als det finner något fan det bekammer.
To me, this sounds like Faroese or Icelandic. It's quite interesting. All right, anyone, raise your hand if you recognize the voice, even if you can't name them. Not that high, though maybe you've been humbled from the last round. Anyone want to identify the voice? Oh, there's a few people. Okay, I'm going to go down here.
Attenborough?
That is correct. It's David Attenborough. All right, let's listen to the voice backwards and then forwards.
Yes, we schrijft ze nog skedel als het fischer. Så nu merker jeg bare det men dere jo slutt som en als det finner något fan det bekammer.
I wonder if there's some priming here. He didn't actually say fish in the forward sample, but he said what sounded like fisher in the backward sample, which may have primed you. Okay, let's hear it forward.
And remarkably enough, not only feathers on the arms, which you can imagine how they became wings, but actually feathers on the legs, which makes you think.
All right. Want to do a couple more? Okay. Voice number 3.
Hoi there on the shish dimming pels. Hoi there on the circular snap as we help. That of me down the zoya since it was the make sig it, but they health yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear it a couple more times.
Hoi there on the shish dimming pels. Hoi there on the circular snap as we help. That of me down the zoya since it was the make sig it, but they health yeah.
And a last time.
Hoi there on the shish dimming pels. Hoi there on the circular snap as we help. That of me down the zoya since it was the make sig it, but they health yeah.
Do you think the voice is recognizable even if you can't name it? Okay. Anyone think they could identify the voice? Okay, we have an enthusiastic hand up in the back. Let's give it a shot.
Gilbert Gottfried.
That is correct. Well done. You might also recognize the voice as that of Iago from Aladdin. Aladdin? Yeah. All right, so let's hear it backward and then forward.
Hoi there on the shish dimming pels. Hoi there on the circular snap as we help. That of me down the zoya since it was the make sig it, but they health yeah.
So what's yeah? Well, let's hear it forward.
I thought he had the biggest scam in show business. I always admired him for that. Like he was a ventriloquist on the radio. It's like being a magician on the radio.
Easy. So clearly some voices are more recognizable and identifiable to us in the audience. Let's hear one more, perhaps more recognizable to those of the Z generation. All right. One more. Okay, a couple more times. Okay, one more. Recognizable? Raise your hand. Maybe. Identifiable? Anyone? There's a hand up. Remember, I can narrow down the pool if we get it wrong.
Is this Cardi B?
It is Cardi B. Well done. Look how amazing we humans are. Let's hear backward and then forward. Forward.
You know what I'm saying? My sister's name is Hennessy, right? So everybody used to call me Bacardi. So I always call myself Bacardi, right? And then it was my Instagram name, like Bacardi.
Easy. All right, so clearly we are good at recognizing voices. I mean, even from a totally open set, some of you were able to recognize voices played backward. It's kind of amazing. How do we do this? How are we good at recognizing voices? We do this because we are good at this because we can recognize voices as complete patterns. We don't need a particular vowel being realized in a particular way or the pitch of the voice being, normal for that speaker's range. We perceive voices as whole things, as complete sets, and we do so really well. We probably acquire familiarity with voices, so we learn to recognize a voice as being familiar very quickly, though this is something that we need a lot more research on to be sure of. And we actually don't know if there's a limit to the number of voices that we humans can recognize. All right, so it's really kind of an amazing feat of being human and being able to familiarize ourselves with different voices and recognize them. But moving on from what our voices tell us about who we are as individuals, now I'm going to talk more about what voices tell us about the languages that we speak. And our voices are really informative of the language that we're speaking, the particular dialect that we're speaking, whether we're at the end or beginning of a particular phrase of an utterance, or whether we're producing certain sounds and not others. So let's see how we use our voice in language. First, we can ask, does the voice vary by language? That is, if I'm bilingual and I speak one language, does my voice change fundamentally when I'm speaking another language? Or do I sound more or less the same, regardless of the languages that I'm speaking? Well, we already have some evidence, quite clear evidence with regards to rhythm, the kind of regular alternation within speech, and intonation, the changes in pitch in speech. We have evidence that we use this information to distinguish languages. If all we're hearing from a speech sample is rhythmic patterns, so alternating something, and intonation, changes in pitch, we can distinguish languages pretty well. This depends on how dissimilar the two languages are. So if we're dealing with a language like English versus Japanese, which are both rhythmically and intonationally very different, if we're just hearing kind of the voice, so that kind of information, we can distinguish English from Japanese really well. Right? Just hearing that kind of that humming nature to the voice. But of course, the more similar the languages are rhythmically and intonationally, the harder this becomes. So English versus Dutch are known to be hard to distinguish by American English listeners when we're just hearing the voice. And American English versus Australian English, so two dialects of the same language, also very hard to distinguish. Though it's an open question, there are dialects of English that are rhythmically and intonationally very different from others, and it's possible that it then becomes easier to distinguish them. So we're very good generally at distinguishing languages just from the rhythm and intonation, and we know that this ability happens or develops very early on in life. But you might be wondering, well, how do we strip down speech to just the voice characteristics? Right? How do we go from the way I sound right now to just that we can play to listeners? Well, there's two strategies. The most common strategy is to use what's called low-pass filtered audio. This means we take a recording and we just include the lower frequencies, and the lower frequencies sound like kind of like speech you would hear through a wall. All right? You're not getting any information about consonants and vowels, you're just getting rhythm and intonation and other aspects of the voice. Another option is to use what I use very regularly, which is called electroglottography, or EGG. This basically approximates what the voice sounds like if you were to measure it right at the vocal folds. So kind of if you've got a microphone going deep down into your throat. This is what an EGG looks like. This is a photo for me from 2012 when I was a fourth or fifth year graduate student at UCLA, wearing the EGG collar, 2 electrodes placed at the neck with a collar around it, and it's indirectly measuring what's happening at your voice. Okay, so let's hear what it sounds like when we just hear EGG information. I'm going to raise the volume a little bit. Might help us, because we're not going to get that many frequencies. All right, so here's comparing speech versus voice.
Was it Alexander?
So just somebody saying, was that Alexander? This is from my dissertation corpus, actually.
Was it Alexander?
All right, we just play the EGG. Newsflash, that's what your voice sounds like. I swear. If you were to place the microphone right by your vocal folds, that buzzy sound is what you sound like. So the rest of our body does wonders at filtering that sound. I'll play it again for you. All right, that's the voice. You're getting rhythm, you're getting intonation, changes in pitch. You're not getting much else. All right, let's play another game. I'm going to play 2 samples from EGG, and all you have to guess is, are these 2 samples from the same language or from 2 different languages? Ready? All right, yellow. And for you. Okay. Green. Again. This is hard. But what do we think? Raise your hand if you think yellow and green come from the same language. Okay. I'm going to guess maybe like 15% of the room. Different languages, raise your hand. Ooh, okay. Majority. That is correct. These come from different languages. Well done. How do you know this? Well, we're going to find out the answer. So first, I'm going to tell you that one of these languages is English. And now I'm going to make it harder for you, perhaps. I'm going to ask you which of the 2, yellow or green, is English? Lexi? Okay, you already have an answer. I'm going to play them first. I won't tell you if you're correct or incorrect. All right, raise your hand if you think English is yellow. Okay, quite a few of you. Green, like Lexi. Lexi was correct. Well done. This is English. In green, and yellow was another language. I'll tell you more soon. Here's the unfiltered sound, so just the audio recording. Yellow.
De pronto Caperucita Roja recordó a su madre, su promesa, su abuela y la canasta. Ella se apresuró de regreso hacia el camino.
What language is that? Spanish. And English, same talker, by the way.
Suddenly, Little Red Riding Hood remembered her mother, her promise, her grandmother, and the basket. She hurried back towards the path.
Actually, the same passage in Spanish and in English, spoken by the same speaker. All right, so how were we able to identify the voice by, or some of us at least, identify the voice by language? Well, it's important to note that there are, first of all, pitch differences. So there's intonational patterns that are different in Spanish versus English. But it's also possible that the quality of the voice, that kind of color to the voice, can vary by language. So just a reminder about what I mean by types of voice quality. So our regular voice quality is the one that we would use kind of most often, but I can get breathier when I'm speaking. I can get tenser, I can get creakier, which both tense and creak both involve more constriction in the voice. And then, of course, I can get growly when I'm speaking, which involves a lot of constriction. All right, and a kind of rough, harsh sound to it. So does the voice quality vary by language? This is actually something that's we have very limited evidence for. There are some studies that have said, yes, speakers who speak more than one language use different voice qualities in the languages. But there's some counter-evidence too. Earlier work by Braining et al. Found that Spanish-Catalan bilinguals, simultaneous bilinguals, had different voice qualities in their Spanish versus their Catalan. Work by Ana Engelbert found that Portuguese learners of English used a different voice quality in their Brazilian Portuguese versus their second language, English. However, more recent work by Kia Johnson and colleagues in Vancouver found that Cantonese and Canadian English bilinguals have basically more or less the same voice when they're speaking in Cantonese or English. So really the jury's out, evidence is mixed. But the question I'm going to raise for tonight is why might the voice vary by language if it does indeed vary by language? Well, for one, different languages use the voice differently. So in some languages, words can be contrasted in terms of just their voice quality. All you have to do is change your voice, you change the meaning of the word. Let's see some examples of this. In Gujarati, language of India, modal, kind of regular voice versus breathy voice is used to distinguish words. So here's modal, regular, mel.
Mel.
All right, versus breathy.
Mel.
All right, you don't want to say dirt instead of palace if you're commenting on it. So changing the voice quality changes the meaning of the word. That's really all that's changing. Gujarati is far from unique here. Here's Danish, language of Denmark. Modal versus kind of a creaky quality. Again, nothing's changing except the voice quality, but it changes the meaning of the word.
Valen. Valen.
Again.
Valen. Valen.
Okay. All that's changing is the quality of the voice. In Bai, a Tibeto-Burman language from southwest China, there's a contrast between more of a tense voice, lots of constriction, and a kind of harsh, growly quality to the voice. That's the only thing that's changing.
Ji.
That's the tense.
Ji.
That's the harsh. Again.
Ji. Ji.
All right, you got to get the voice quality right to get the word right. So that's clearly, if we're using our voices to contrast words, that's one way in which languages can differ in terms of their voice quality. So we could ask, well, how many voice qualities can a language contrast? Usually, if a language contrasts voice qualities, they'll contrast no more than 3. 3 is already on the high end. There is an exception, though. East Kron, a language of Botswana, has at least 6 different voice qualities that contrast. Don't believe me? Here we go. Here are the 6. So, modal.
Ka.
Breathy.
Cao.
Creaky.
Ye.
Breathy, creaky.
Ye.
Pharyngalized.
Ka.
Harsh.
How.
All right, so you got to get the voice quality right to say the right word in this language. And you might think, well, this is a really complex system. And it is. You're right. It is really complex. But actually, in work that I've done, analyzing already existing recordings by Tony Triel and Peter Ladefoget, I found that even though this system on the surface looks really complex, acoustically, it's really easy, actually, to differentiate the voice qualities. We only need 3 measures. And with 3 measures, we can effectively separate out all these voice qualities rather well, at least statistically, which implies that speakers of the language will have no problem differentiating these. So we, speakers of English and other languages that do not use voice quality contrastively, or this many voice qualities, might wonder, oh my gosh, how do you do all of these voice qualities? But in fact, acoustically, they're easily differentiated. All right, so languages can differ in their voice quality in part because sounds and words can contrast in terms of their voice quality. Voice quality is also very useful for social meaning. So within just English on its own, we know that breathy voices, are associated with women's speech. Now, that doesn't mean that all women have breathier voices than men. It just means that generally we ascribe breathiness to more for women's voices, also for black voices, speaking in American English. Creaky voice might be associated with gender-based differences. This is still, the jury's still out, and it certainly varies by dialect. Now, some of you may have heard that creaky voice, or you might have heard it being called vocal fry, is bad for you. So if you end sentences, like this, really constricted and creaky, irregular, that you're harming your voice. You're not. Keep doing it. It's great. It's informative. Don't worry about it. If you were harming your voice, then every single person in Denmark would have a voice disorder. We have a clinician in the room, actually. Maxine, does everyone in Denmark have a voice disorder, according to your expert opinion?
No.
Thank you, Maxine. All right. Now, also we know that different voice qualities are used by listeners when asked to perceive differences in gender identity and expression, as well as sexuality. Listeners will rely to some extent on voice quality in making these judgments. We know this from work by our very own Ben Lang. Ben, where are you? I saw you earlier. There you are. So, yes, we're doing great research here at UCSD. All right, so lots of social meaning ascribed to the voice. Additionally, we know that voice quality changes within a particular speaker are associated with changes in phrasing. So taking a longer utterance, chunking it up into smaller parts. So in English, at least in North American Englishes, we tend to end phrases with some creaky voice. You may have noticed when I'm speaking that virtually every utterance I say ends with some kind of creak. It's very hard for me to turn off. It's part of my English. So this was the example that I played for you earlier from that bilingual speaker of English and Spanish.
Suddenly, Little Red Riding Hood remembered her mother, her promise, her grandmother, and the basket. She hurried back towards the path.
So this speaker said mother with creak on the basket, and a little bit of creak on path. Don't believe me? I have evidence. Mother, we can see here acoustically that the voicing is becoming irregular on that last syllable. Her promise, her grandmother, and the basket, really creaky at the end. And then she hurried back towards the path, creak on path. All right, so this bilingual speaker of English and Spanish is clearly creaking at the ends of certain phrases. That information is really useful to us. It's telling us that the speaker is finished with a particular part of their utterance, what they're saying. Now let's look at the same, or listen first to the same speaker's Spanish again.
De pronto Caperucita Roja recordó a su madre, su promesa, su abuela y la canasta. Ella se apresuró de regreso hacia el camino.
The same speaker is actually using breathy voice at the ends of various phrases. I should state, by the way, this is ongoing work, and this is work with Maxine Van Doren and Claudia Duarte Borges. I don't know if Claudia's here, but this is work that's ongoing. Maybe some of you have been involved in this project one way or another. So this same speaker uses breathiness at the ends of phrases in Spanish. Don't believe me? I have evidence. All right, a su madre, the egg gets breathy at the end, just a little bit. La canasta. Actually, this looks kind of breathy, creaky at the same time. It's both irregular and breathy, which is really cool. Stay tuned for information about that. I mean, in the long future, not at the end of this talk. And then hacia el camino, the O here ends with a lot of breath. So this speaker clearly is using different strategies, modulating her voice quality differently in her English versus Spanish. So this is one way in which our voices can differ by language. So back when I played for you the EGG recordings of this speaker, where you only got voice information, and quite a few of you knew that yellow was not English, I'm going to play these again for you, and I want you to pay attention to whether you can hear that voice quality difference at the ends of phrases in Spanish in yellow versus English in green. I kind of hear that like laxer quality at the ends of the phrases. But of course, this is my work, and I know it is breathy at the ends of the phrases. Play it one more time. And now let's hear the creakiness in English. So every time you hear that kind of like buzz, extra buzz at the ends of the phrases, that's the creak that you're hearing. So those of you who were able to distinguish English from non-English on this exercise, you may have just been using rhythm, because there are rhythmic differences. You may have been using intonation. There are intonational pitch differences. But you might also have been paying attention to the voice quality, which the green example does sound more English-like, at least to my admittedly a little bit habituated ears. Okay, so voices speak volumes. They tell us a lot about us. When speaking, our voices do absolutely amazing things. We use them to change our pitch, our tempo, our loudness, and our quality. We can recognize familiar voices with remarkable ease. I mean, those of you who got the voice played backwards without any information, kudos to you. Voices also tell us a little bit about who we are. Our voices tell us how we speak, how we want to be heard, so information about us that we want to convey, and they're really integral parts to the way we use our spoken language. Now, I might never be able to sing like somebody like Mariah Carey, but I can do amazing things with my spoken voice, and so can all of you. So thank you all for attending, and I'll just say this is me as an undergraduate research assistant talking to Kermit the Frog back in 2007. This was my first, my very first research project, working on acquisition of semantics. I've taken a turn since. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I did not comprehend that you said that until after. So just a few thank yous before we head out. First off, obviously, Marc, thank you so much for putting together this presentation and working with us through a kind of rocky planning process. It's very clear that you put a lot of time and effort into this, and also into your teaching on the whole, because your students nominated you out of every professor in the school. And so just to kind of commemorate this, we actually have a plaque that we would like to give you on behalf of Scholar Society. Additionally, I'd like to thank university centers. They actually let us use this space free of charge, particularly Martha Martinez Acosta and Rosalie Celestial, who helped plan this event and deal with all the logistics, setting up the space, etc. Also, our voice and video technician for recording this so that we can disseminate it to people who couldn't make it. Lastly, I just want to thank you and the broader UCSD community as a whole for continuing to engage with Legacy Lecture. What is a lecture if you have no one to attend? And also, we need you for the polling anyways. That's how we figure out who the best professors on campus are, and then we invite them. I think other than that, thanks again for coming. You can mingle in this space and schmooze about until around 8 p.m. And then I think that's it. We had a few issues with people checking in, so if you were not able to get check-in working, then I'd appreciate if you could come to the front desk again, just because that's important for the university to actually fund us. But yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks again, Marc, for that wonderful lecture.
Thank you, everyone. Schmooze away.